So an old man walks into a bar. That's me. And there's a note from my favorite Russian, not Putin. His name is Igor Roskov. He's a former software developer and strategic thinker. He's worked for me in the past. And he says, I need to check out something called Defy Ventures, D-E-F-Y. Actually, he's more insistent. He says there's an event happening on July 23rd, 2016, and that I'm required to be there. And when your favorite Russian says you have to do something, of course you do. And that begins the tale of how I ended up in prison. Give you a little background. As she said, I've been the CEO or co-founder of 8 different technology companies over 25 years. I'm currently a small-time venture capitalist, which means that I write checks and then run companies into the ground. I serve on boards of directors. I spend additional time mentoring young entrepreneurs. I go to pitch fests. I'm on panels. And I find this work somewhat satisfying, but I'm also beset by the nagging suspicion that many of my young charges and entrepreneurs don't really listen very well. What they really want is just money, and they seem to be afflicted with a disease of personal entitlement. This room is excluded from that, of course. So Igor challenges me to do something harder, mentoring inmates, people behind bars. You know, go spend some time in a level 4 maximum security prison and do your mentoring there. It's easy to do it with your favorite PhD, a computer scientist from UCSD, but see if you can make a difference with a more challenging group of individuals. And as I pointed out, Igor can be very direct. So, welcome to Defy Ventures. Defy Ventures is a program developed by a woman named Katherine Hoch. She has an amazing story. You can see it online. Go to defyventures.org. She brings entrepreneurship training and principles into the prison before they get out. It's currently in 21 prisons in California, New York, and just started in Nebraska. Now, as the nice lady said, I write a column on entrepreneurship every week. It runs on the front page of the business section of the local rag, the San Diego Union Tribune, but I'm sure that nobody in this particular audience gets the paper. But it is online. And I've been doing this column for almost 5 years, so I decided that I'll interview Katherine Hoch before I agree to go up and schlep to the prison in the middle of nowhere, which is in Lancaster, California. At a minimum, I'll get a good column out of it. I do the interview, and she is, in fact, the real deal. She is compelling, charismatic, convincing. You can read about her. She is truly a force of nature. And so I agree that I will go to participate in the Defy program in California State Prison in Lancaster on July 23rd. But when the interview ends, she tells me directly that after my day in prison, she's going to ask me for money, and my attitude is, let's be fair, I'm a venture capitalist, people do it every day, and I'm good at also being able to say no. Now, to do these adventures, you need a wingman, common. So I call a pal of mine named Mark Bowles. He's easy to Google. He's a guy with some hard knocks, a few failures, but he recently crushed the ball with a company called EcoATM. He sold it for over $300 million, and so he's all in, goes down like a stone, and so the two of us are set for some prison time. Commencement speakers, you're going to have one in a couple weeks, I gather. They will always tell you to wear sunscreen. It turns out on July 23rd, the temperature in Lancaster was a sunny 109 degrees, but you can forget the sunscreen, you're going to be in prison. Next problem, how to get to Lancaster. From San Diego, it is 180 miles. In a car with Bowles for 3 hours, not going to happen. So we decide to rent a private plane. Now, this is really an important moment. You got to get real here. These two bums are going to spend a day in prison, and they're arriving to do their good deeds in a private plane. This is called Disconnect City, and later we will noodle on that marvelous word, privilege. But for now, we'll go to prison. So on this day, we go. There are 55 inmates. They are called EITS, Entrepreneurs in Training. That's how they're addressed. And there's 55 of them and 19 of us, 11 men and 8 women. They come mostly from Los Angeles, and the two of us came from San Diego. Who are the volunteers? It's fascinating. They're all over the map. Technologists, some work in nonprofits, some are school teachers, some are lawyers, some are religious practitioners. The range is broad. There is no easy pattern. Just people who feel the need to give back, to connect, to make a difference. And we're not quite all in yet, but it's a good thing to get out of your comfort zone. After all, it's a Saturday. If we didn't go to prison, I would have played golf and he would have surfed. So we're going to reset some personal priorities. Now, before you go to prison, or more accurately, before they let you get into prison, there are rules, lots of rules. You need to fill out forms. You need to get a clearance. I'm going to tell you it might be easier to get in if you just robbed a bank. No cell phones, no electronics, no nothing except your keys. And as for clothing, very clear rules here. They tell you what to wear, black and white. No blue, no jeans, no blue. So, of course, one of the volunteers shows up in a blue blazer, but what do you expect? He was a lawyer from Los Angeles. So we're sitting in the waiting room before you go into the prison, and the warden comes in and welcomes us and explains the rules again. The one I like the best, he says, no hostages. I mean, what do you mean? If you're taken hostage, we don't do anything for you. They don't negotiate. Oh, so you're somewhere between Orange is the New Black and NCIS Los Angeles. You can see some twitching in the room. There are a bunch of good-looking, very buffed-out guards standing there. It seems pretty safe. But when you get inside the prison, this is the best part. So the event takes place in a big room like the basketball court. There's a sign on the wall in English and Spanish. There's a parapet. It says, no warning shots fired. I didn't really understand it. What that means is shoot to kill. No warning shots. So welcome to their world. Program runs all day. We meet, we talk, they do personal statements, resumes, we review and discuss their business plans. It's a 5-month program. One of the key themes of Defy is to guide the EITs to develop those personal elements, to have them begin to think like entrepreneurs. And it's fascinating, it's moving, it's compelling, it is scary, and what you think is you're going to change their lives, but in fact, it changes yours. Program runs for 5 months. There's lectures, video, lessons, plans, whatever. Now, I want to tell you about the most powerful event of the day. It's called Walk the Line. So let's do a line here. So what happens is the volunteers stand 5 steps back from the line, and the EITs, they stand 5 steps behind on their line. I'm going to tell you that this little program they have reduces you to an emotional puddle of confusion and feelings you have not experienced ever. So what happens is Ms. Hoch reads certain sentences like, I dropped out of high school. EITs, they're all on the line. Volunteers, no one. And so the sentences go on. You begin to see things about each other. She says, I'm a natural-born hustler, kind of 50-50. I regularly feel judged by others for skin or economic status. Lots of EITs on the line. I grew up in poverty, and this is boom shakalaka time. My buddy Bowles stands on the line. So what you begin to see is you don't know a lot about the other people. It's kind of interesting. My parents paid for braces when I was a child. No EITs. So you can begin to see these are serious stuff. I've been arrested. Several of the volunteers are on the line. This is pretty interesting. And I'm telling you, you're only 5 steps from each other. You can see this. Here's the heartbreaker. I've lost a child. Lots of people stand on the line. So I had my thoughts about the EITs, but what surprised me, as I've told you, is the volunteers. You never know what lurks in the past of your friends when you see them step the line, and it reminds you deeply of your shared humanity. There's some darkness in all of us, and we exercise those demons in many ways. One of them is to give back to the least among us, which these gentlemen are. So you get the message here. This is real stuff. And when you look across the line at the other person, you realize they're not going home tonight. And there are some other things and some tears and some hugs, and it moves you. Now, I like to quote Warren Buffett. Buffett said, I won the ovarian lottery when I was born white, male, healthy, smart, and growing up in America. And it tends to remind you about gratitude and good fortune and privilege. So the day ended, and as promised, Ms. Hoch comes up to me and says she wants each of us, me and Bowles, to give her $500. They're a nonprofit. They need money. They ask for it. Their biggest contributors are Google, Microsoft, and other Silicon Valley venture funds. And Ms. Hoch is shameless, and you got to love her for it. So she says, I want the $500, and we say, no. Like, this is, whoa. She's not used to getting that, a no. So my quick response, though, is, tell you what I'll do. If you're willing to bring the program to Donovan, Donovan is the state prison in San Diego at the border. If you bring it to San Diego, I'll raise you $100,000. My assessment is simple. I care about my community and these guys at Donovan. It's a level 4 maximum security federal prison. And when they get out, they're going to be my neighbors in this city. So if I'm going to write a check, I'm going to do it in my town. It's a little parochial. I'm not totally proud of it, but, think local. So here's the next big connect. Me and Bowles, we get in the plane. We fly home, 54 minutes. Later, I'm on the ground. 12 minutes later, because you land at Montgomery, I go to Emerald Seafood. I'm sitting there with my wife, and I have the WTF moment. Let's see now. You want to spend the day in prison, you fly home in a private plane, you're having dinner, and these guys go back in their cells. That little epiphany took a little time to digest, if you will. So Sunday afternoons, the next day, I get a call from the executive vice president of Defy. He lives in New York, and he says, blah, blah, blah. I'm interested in discussing blah, blah, blah. And I'm not a blah, blah guy. So I say, I tell you what, if I promise to raise you 100 grand, will you or will you not come? It's like a prosecutor. Will you come to San Diego? Because they weren't planning to come on San Diego. So he gets this hesitation, kind of, you can hear this on the phone, kind of like, oh, you're sort of like no hattin', all hat and no cattle. Like, are you really going to be able to do this? Now, but I make him a promise. I said, you give me 60 days, 100 grand, and you promise to do a 2-year program at Donovan. I told you I write a column in the local newspaper. So I write the column about my day in prison, and it ends with a little last paragraph. If you're interested in participating in this adventure, here's my email. My email is easy to find. Now, I have a secret weapon. I have a wife. Her name is Barbara Bree. She's actually the city council person for District 1, which is your district. It's neither here nor there. I happen to think she's gorgeous, smart, and beloved by all. That cannot be said necessarily about her husband, but it turns out that 3 years ago, she was picked for one of the local heroes. She was a big shot for Women's History Month. Watch. The event was sponsored by KPBS. It was underwritten by Union Bank. I write the article in the paper, and the lady 3 years earlier who had given my wife the award, her name is Kathy Patoff. She runs the foundation at Union Bank. She says, I'm in. You're in? For $50,000. Turns out that prison education, recidivism, entrepreneurship seems to be one of their things. So now I'm halfway home. Then I wrote the article, so I start to get emails. I get 57 emails from people I've never heard from, Joe Dokes, Betty Boop, and they agree that they will contribute somewhere between, and this is the truth, $25 was the least, $2,000 was the most, and from the 57, 38 people put up $27,000. Me and my bums, couple of my pals, we put up 40 grand. If you add that to the 50 of Union Bank, lo and behold, I call up the character in New York and I say, time to deliver. A deal's a deal. So sure enough, this is the nature of entrepreneurship. You sort of love exceeding expectations. I didn't think he thought that I thought that he thought. I got him. So on January 27th this year, they launched their program at Donovan, and the first 55 guys are in the program. Now, I'm going to push you a little bit. It's easy to give money. This going to prison, though, just to be a volunteer for a day, it's a little like going down to Father Joe on Thanksgiving. You serve turkey, you take your children, it feels good, you go home, you watch football, and you have a beer. So what you can't do is that's bullshit. The trick in this prison entrepreneurship business is repetition for effect. No drive-by shooting, hello and goodbye. You got to commit. I went the first time I now teach at Donovan twice a month. And the first time I came back, the second time, I got a standing ovation. And the reason is nobody comes back a second time. So if you do it, you got to be all in. So me and Bowles go to the next event in Lancaster. This is the graduation. It occurs in September. Now they got 55 volunteers. And they got some big shots from the venture firms in Los Angeles, 2 people that I love, Mark Suster and Brad Feld. And it's quite a day. They pitch, there's business plans, it's a Shark Tank. And it ends with a real competition and a graduation, and there's some winners. They get the money when they get out. There's a cap and gown graduation ceremony, and it crushes you in terms of the enormity of the feelings because their families are there. And the families are going to go home, but they don't. So what I'm going to tell you is it reminds you deeply of the shoes you walk in. I'm always struck by one comment from all of the prisoners that I've ever interacted with. Everyone, 100%, say that when I get out, I will never do that stupid thing again. I'm not ever coming back. And the answer is, statistically, 32% of them do come back. It must be for the food. They can't seem to stay away. But the people who take the Defy Ventures program, their rate of recidivism is 4%. 4. So you can't argue with numbers, data scientists. Something must be working. Now, they have another thing. They say, we've all done things that were illegal, that could have landed us in jail, but we didn't get caught. drugs, drunk driving, shoplifting, maybe worse. Without luck or a good lawyer, we'd be the inmates, not the volunteers. It's important to remember those kind of things. So I got a couple of final stories, and then I'm done. I end up going all in at Donovan. I now teach, as I said, twice a month. I teach to CGA. Everybody knows what that is. Criminal Gangs Anonymous, of course. That's the equivalent for gang members of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I also have written a couple books. You can find them online. And I want to point out that I am now currently the best-selling author in prison. Take that, John Grisham. So here's the final story. In the afternoon, there's an exercise where the volunteers stand in a circle, facing out, and the EITs go around us. So you stay seated, you stay standing, and the EITs, the inmates, and you get 4, 5, 6 minutes with each of them. So over the next 45 minutes, you meet 8 or 9 different people. You talk to them, you understand what they're up to. The final guy arrives, the last guy, stops right in front of me. He's about 60. He's black. Most of the prisoners, of course, are either black or Hispanic. There's a few white. The natural diversity of a prison, I won't go into that. Now, here's what you got to grab. He's got one tooth, right in the front. And he begins to tell me about himself. He's been in prison 32 years, but he makes a point of thanking me. I'd been called out as one of the promoters of Defy. He thanks me for this chance, for bringing Defy to the prison. He's really grateful. Really grateful. And then he looks me hard in the eye. You cannot turn away from this guy. And here's what he says word for word. I pray for you every night. Whoa, stop the madness, pal. I live in $1 million home on the top of a hill in La Jolla, and you're praying for me? There's something going on. So needless to say, at that moment, I had a bit of trouble keeping my balance. My world was spinning, and I was looking at myself in a hall of mirrors and distortions and wonderment at the nature of the ovarian lottery. And there it was. Be grateful, my friends, because there, but for the grace of God, go I. Always there, but for the grace of God.